who sees his father drinking. And as a result, he has two kids. They said one grew up to be a drunkard like his father, the other one grew up to be sober. And they said, "Why do you drink?" "I drink because my father drank." And the other one says, "I don't drink because my father drank." So I think it's a choice, and I think it's what we reward, in short. So I don't think we're inherently violent, but I believe that based on what the reward system is, I think violence is perpetuated and promoted.
Yeah, I don't think we, like Astel said, you know, we have young men growing up in homes where they've seen violence up close and personal, and they have chosen a different path. If have young men growing up in a home where alcohol and drugs were present, but those young men, they're young men who chose not to go in that direction. But I think more so, you have a good home, good father, good mother, everything there. But when that child, when that boy goes out to school, he hangs out with a group of boys and they begin to talk about their experiences. And so here's a young man who wants to fit in. He wants to fit into that group. And so he follows those friends away from the traditions of his home. He follows it. So a lot of parents, when you call a parent and he says, "Look, your son is behaving in such a manner in school or at work," they're shocked, because this child is so good at home. They can't believe he harms a fly. But away from the home, he is in a society, be it club or school or workplace. They want to fit in, and so a lot of times you have those reactions. So for me, I don't think it's something that they inherit. It's more of a choice, that they follow after those things.
Right, so as Calvin asked this question about, are we men inherently violent? Is it in our genes? There's a question that we keep asking, because I think anger, all of those things are emotions that we use and we resort to them. And in the work that I had to do on myself, is acknowledging that I too am capable of violence and abuse, and sometimes it comes from a place where I might not even know. And there is a lot of discussion, because even within that framework of beating children in school, I mean, can you imagine how awful that is, that the government is adopting the role of the colonialists? And from slavery downwards, they had frameworks similar to what the government, the head teacher has replaced the plantation owner and the governor general, who used to authorize the whipping of prisoners. So let us remember that culture, as Dr. Lashley said, that is the culture. So what has happened is, and there's discussion about, is it in our genes? Have we inherited in our genes this trauma of slavery, of indentureship, of colonialism, so that we are pulling sometimes from what we deep within us, this viciousness, when we least expect it? And I have to be accountable. There's a woman I worked with who once told me, after a phone conversation, that I reminded her of her abusive ex-boyfriend. I ended that conversation because I was shocked. I didn't know what I said. A man I love, a brave man, told me twice that he was afraid of me. And this is a man who ain't frightened nothing, as far as I know. And this again was after a phone conversation. And this was it. Now, this is me going through all this domestic violence counseling, lining with people like Debbie and Tivia and so on, right? And feminists and so on, doing all this work. But at some point, we had an argument, both situations, and whatever came out of me, they both said they were scared of me. So are we inherently violent? I don't know. But what I do know is that we have the potential for transformation and change.
Thank you very much. As you guys are speaking about this and just considering that question myself, I draw back on my biology days, and I would like to go even beyond or before, rather, any talk about colonialism or slavery and so on, and think of the human society in a different era when men performed different roles that required, quote unquote, violence. and that men were then selected for because of their size, their ability to hunt, and so on. And that may provide the propensity for, but I like the words particularly that Pastor Finley and Astel used, that there is a choice, that whereas you may have the potential for to go to the extent to say that we're inherently violent or tolerant of it, that comes to a matter of choice for us. And I think that that was a clear message coming out of that discourse. So given that this is maybe a matter of choice, we're not necessarily, men may have the potential for, but not inherently violent or tolerant of violence, then we must ask ourselves, well, what then can be done given the situation that you described, the issues that we've spoken to? What are some of the ways that we may be able to prevent this violence coming up in society? Right? What are some of the ways, this conversation we're having, we're talking about Guyanese men can. We've asserted that. We weren't asking a question. We're saying Guyanese men can. Well, in what ways, if we really believe that, in what ways might Guyanese men be able to disrupt the violence and the tolerance for violence and gender-based violence again in particular?
All right. I think we need to do more. We need to reach out to men more. I mean, look, evidently here today, we see men do not come to sessions like these. And I have always advocated, and Vidya will know, when we go to meet men, we meet men where they are. If you call a man or men to a forum like this, they may come in, because most times when they come to forums like these, they're being beaten up. So they don't want to get licks. They don't want to be verbally abused or emotionally distraught. So they don't come. But I think what we can possibly do is to have more outreaches. And this is where the clubs, the social clubs, the communities, the church can do more stuff. Because the truth of the matter is a lot of men do not know how to respond or to react to situations. And because it's something that they see their friends do, they do the same thing. And I'll tell you, I mean, with the matter of anger, we can control our anger. But sometimes a man think, well, I can't control my anger. But he would get up and slap a woman, but he wouldn't slap a man at the same time, right? And then here's a father, he's in the house, he's beaten up on his wife and children, and he's on top of things, and then his boss calls on the phone, and the daughter says, "Daddy, it's the boss." Immediately he breaks down, picks up the phone. "Hi, boss, how you doing?" Yeah, I'm coming a little late today. Totally different. And I remember a story, this guy, he was going to the salon and he was drinking and stuff. I'll make it fast. And he rides his horse and he parks it in front, ties the horse in front, and he goes in and drinks up everybody alcohol, drinks up everybody beer, pick it up and drink it. And then everybody was so scared of him because he was a bad man. And then he goes outside, and a bigger man paints his horse in green. So he comes back in when he goes, and he says, "Who paint my horse in green? Somebody can dare it today." No, somebody can dare it today. Whoever paint my horse. So nobody said nothing. And then he turns around, somebody touches him on the shoulder, and he turns around and he sees a bigger man than he. And he says, "It's okay, man. I just tell you the first coat try, you could put on the second coat now." Meaning that he jumps on those he can jump on. And the same thing with men. We hit on our wives, we hit on our children, because we can hit on them. But the guy at work or wherever, he backs us up and he says, okay, it's okay. And you move on. So we need more of those interventions, letting men know that, look, you can control this thing. You can do this. You can walk away from this. You know what I'm saying? We need more of those interventions, in my opinion.
So it's true that you know, it's where do you meet men and how do we empathize? There's a whole discussion about how do we get off with men or with each other and how do we like to be tough? Because as a little boy, I ain't like nobody telling me you know, I still don't like anybody telling me what to do, right? So it's an engagement. And I'm thinking of the minibus driver. There are two men I want to talk about. There was just outside the Center for Behavioral Sciences, one of the workmen, there loud cussing going on. Some story with the excavator. I thought to myself, it's just right near to the Center of Behavioral Sciences in the University of Ghana. I'm coming to this forum. I was wondering, should I go up to that man and say, here, nobody, what's going on? It's somebody blocking him or whatever, right? But you know, in this very quiet, serene space, there's that happening. I had to make a choice that I didn't have the emotional intelligence at the time to do it. Minibus driver playing gospel one morning, and then the gospel track changed to the, you know, fire panel, batty man, stink, and you know, all the thing, right? The nastiness. I say, hey man, this you boss, lift up the nation a little bit, the man, and so on, right? And the man looked at me and said, I don't know what it's like out there that you know, this is the music that God play, because if you play the other kind of music. And he looked like he was about to fight me, and his face was set and things like that. I saw the man a couple of weeks, I back off. I had somewhere to go and I didn't want the bus crash. You know, the man beat me up. But a couple of days after the man met me, he lives on the road, and he said that he thought, because I said something, they said, no man, this is your bus. You can create this space and you can decide how you want your bus to be. Right, talking to him about his power. So he's feeling powerless because he thinks the society and the passengers want him to play the cuss of the batty man. And there is a private sector, alcohol industry, Guinness, Stag, and so on, wanting him to cuss up batty man and so on, right? Because remember, it's all linked, right? It's not the man alone we got to deal with, right? We got a whole world out there that wants the man to be like that. There's a whole world out there that wants men to be violent and wants patriarchy to continue. But the man then said to me, I have thought about what you said. And I was striking, I was glad to hear. And we kind of gabbed, but then it occurred to me that no one has ever said to that man before, you got some power, and this is a change, and hey, you don't have to be what you think. I know how many bus drivers I learned gaffing about trying to change the music. How many of those guys are playing nasty, dirty, stinky music because they think we want to hear it, the passengers want to hear it. There's a racial element as well. The Indian bus driver said this is what them black people like to hear. And I said, well, black people like gospel too. Right? So, but this is, but you see, this is the kind, unless you got this car, and I don't even know, I mean, as I said, I travel in minibus, but sometimes I can't do it because I might get, you know, I get kicked out of the bus. One time I told the bus driver to stop harassing the woman in the bus, say, you want to rape the girl? The man look like he want to beat me up. I look like I want to rape anybody. Get your, that's one. Right? So, I mean, you know, we got to get time and place. Right. Good. So, yeah, that's what you're asking, right?
Thank you.
Okay, so I would say that first get involved because they have a saying, right? You may never get to live 1,000 lives, but if you read 1,000 books, you live 1,000 lives. So without you being involved, you wouldn't have any idea or get any knowledge about what is going on. And furthermore, you could challenge the harmful masculine norms, right, that encourage violence among other men. And in doing so, you would open up and talk with your peers, your friends, and so forth. And likewise, you cut out any of the sexist jokes, those remarks, any of those languages. Partnering with that, integrity will play a big role, not just for yourself, but for your peers. Some people might just camouflage it and be like, man, I barely give she a slap, or I just use one and two curse word. But you need to be honest with yourself and realize when gender-based violence is occurring and what methods we can use to put a halt to it. Likewise, having self-awareness. Now, this will give you the tools to understand your strengths and weakness And as well, what are your triggers to anger? And this would allow you as well to confide in others or your peers or even family. And that could help you to shape making a change.
Oh, okay. I think we need to hold our elected officials with greater responsibility. Because usually as a child, there was a time you look up at a teacher or anyone who has some amount of leadership responsibility. They need to be held accountable. And I don't think we do well in Guyana in holding people accountable. And I think there need to be a parallel with the word abuse and violence. Because we restrict violence to just hitting as we do abuse. But I can be verbally abusive, I can be psychologically abusive. And I think we need to broaden the scope of what abuse and violence really contains. Because I can say somebody, because, and I think Mr. Kesoon alluded to it earlier, he just spoke and the person felt as if they're afraid of him. So I believe that we can be verbally abusive. Somebody said, I was abused, but the person who was in charge said, I never touched her. So even though she was saying that he abused me, and I think she was alluding to verbal abuse, he said I never touched her. And even in our parliament, we heard well documented one of our elected officials disparagingly spoke of another MP, and that was not, he was not held accountable. So I think we need to bring the conversation not only to those of us who cannot legislatively make any change or, you know, but I think there needs to be greater accountability from those above because we are literally modeling our lives based on those whom we perceive to be in some amount of authority.
I agree with Mr. Collins on this ground that we should hold each one of us accountable for our action. Then we should hold our brothers, our friends, our colleagues accountable for their action that perpetrate violence in any form, psychological, social, domestic, socioeconomic, whatever form of violence. Hold yourself accountable that you would not perpetrate any form of violence. When you hold yourself accountable, you will act in a certain way. Your action will influence those you have some sort of power or influence over to act in a manner that does not condone violence in any way. Secondly, as Pastor Finley said, we need to meet men folks, where men folks gather, where men folks socialize, and where men folks are willing to listen to influence. And when we get there, we don't participate as us, who think we don't perpetrate violence or think we have learned the coping mechanism and we're there to share it or we're there to teach it. But we participate. So they may be in a gathering having a conversation, we become a part of that conversation. We become a part of the society. And as well, while we become a part of the society and we are trying to shape the practice that we want, we also need to show examples within that society, point them in where to look for positive role models, positive examples. And then, once we've got this covered, we go back to what Mr. Collins says, and we look to our leaders and ask them, where's the support?
Thank you very much. You hold on to that, please. Right. So a couple of very significant points came out there, and I want to perhaps highlight maybe three of them for a bit of expansion. Pastor Finley, you spoke about meeting men where men are. And I might add to that, in ways that men can be met. Yeah? Not only the physical place, but in terms of the way in which we communicate. I wonder if, one, we try to expand on that. If you yourself might take it up and give us a minute or two, just expanding a bit more specifically and what very specific things we can do in terms of getting to meet men where men exist so that we can affect this issue of tolerance to violence, men, considering to men that might have been violent already, whether within the context of gender-based violence or otherwise, how do we do that, please?
Well, when I was with the Men's Affairs Bureau, what we did, we went out, we met men in the rum shop. We met men on the seawall, fishermen. I was there meeting men on the fisher ball. You know, uh, we met men on the football field. You know, these are all interventions that we did. We got to where they were, and I like what you said, Doc. You don't meet men to instruct them. I mean, I've learned that very early when I was sitting in that office. You don't tell a woman to tell your husband to come, let me counsel you. They never come.
Not coming
They
to.
never come because they don't want another session of counseling. Mr. Kisujan, I don't want nobody to tell me nothing. So I would tell him, come, let's gaff. Come, let's talk. You know what I mean? And that has helped tremendously. So getting out there, you know, we did cricket, football, any place. Like, you know, I have a lot of fishing buddies. We go fishing. That's a splendid opportunity to sit down and listen to men. Tonight we are going hunting, and don't ask me where and when, but we're going hunting tonight with some real big people. And you would be amazed to know when these big guns, these big guys, peel off their whole stature, and we just hang out and talk stuff. You know what I mean? And a lot of people will tell you that men don't like talk, but that's not true. Men, some men just talk all night. But it depends on the scenario, and you will hear some stuff from men. So that's what I was talking about. Get into them, talk with them, befriend them, let them know that, look, we're not judging you. No. We're here to support you. We want to hear you and share your own experiences. Like I would share my own experiences. I grew up in my father was an alcoholic, and I saw what happened to him, and I would share those experiences. You know what I mean? And they will, you know, and they will grasp at that whole business. So for the answer, I hope it, you know, is getting there, forming an allegiance with them, meeting them in their neck of the woods. When I talk to Christian men, I sit down with them again and we talk stuff. I talk with all kind of men, and we sit down and we talk how we can do and what we can do. One of the things I would love to see before I depart this earth is to see more people celebrating men. I see men take their kids to school. I see men do so many things, and nobody know. You don't see nothing. You let a man make a mistake, and he do something wrong. I need to see more people post those pictures of men carrying them kids to school. You know, I mean, men moving here, doing that, all kind of stuff. That encourages us to do more, and so it's a work to be done. I mean, a lot has been done. A lot more has to be done, but I feel we're on the right track.
Thank you. You want to add to that?
I think he hit the nail on the head. Men are not celebrated. If you look to between Mother's Day, how mothers are celebrated, how fathers are celebrated, and he's right. There's a lot of fathers who do a lot for their sons. For example, there was a father recently whose son attends a school I don't want to mention, and this father committed suicide. This was a model father. He would pick up his son, put his son on his shoulder, walk with him, take him to lesson. I admired this father and was shocked to know that 2 weeks prior, he committed suicide. And it shows that men are not celebrated, men are not even acknowledged. And I think that vacuum that has been created by how society treats men, that they go, like I said, where they're rewarded. And I think if we can find a space where we are safe, a safe space, where issues can be discussed and real issues, real talk. I think, and for example, the 16 days of activism, it is a more focused on women, but you don't have, you know, there are so many men who commit suicide. There are so many issues surrounding men. And I don't think there is a national interest or as if we lack the testicular fortitude to bring it to the fore. And it's always something and like an afterthought. So I don't believe we have the aggression that is required for us to deal with this or take the bulls by the horn and really deal with the issues. The president should be commended for acknowledging with the men on a mission. But in addition to that, you know, some things look good aesthetically, but if you look beyond the undercurrent, what are the policies what is the philosophy that guides the whole movement? So you need to be sincere and authentic in terms of our reaction or response, I think.
Thank you very much.
Just
On
to,
the same point,
yes, yes, just to add a short,
meeting men where men are.
right?
Yes.
We see the importance, as Pastor mentioned, where men are more comfortable, right? So if we look at some example, I believe every one of us, if not all, have been to a barbershop. And the level of conversations that occur in there is one that is based on trust, right? And where men feel comfortable. So adding on to what was discussed, if we can create support channels that would allow an environment of inclusiveness where men can feel safe enough to express their emotions. And this can be in the form of either peer advocacy hubs or different areas that are centered around gender-based violence and coping mechanism.
Right. So the second point, and there's a critical point there, I hope I remember to come back to the, because it's the second time this is being mentioned or referred to. But I want to go to the second point that I noted from the previous responses, which is about empowering men. Empowering men, moving men from a place where they feel disempowered and empowering them to be able to act against violence or to be less tolerant of violence. I think it was Vidya who mentioned that bit of empowerment. I don't know if you want to add a bit more to that, a minute or two, and anyone else who wants to add in quickly on that.
Right. So this word empower is a very tricky word, because I've learned from the feminists who talk that really and truly there's this discussion is, do I empower myself, or is it that somebody else has to empower me? So we gotta be these words that we use and these ideas, is it that you want to provide an opportunity that if a man wants to transform himself from being violent into someone who is not violent, or who understands being assertive without being violent, then there's got to be a space for that. And I like this idea, it's interesting, this idea of how we need to see more positive images of men, because I'm often confused over what positive images of men do we need. The president met with church leaders, and all of the church leaders were men. The FIFA World Cup going on without football is all men. The West Indies cricket team and all the cricket and so that we just complain about is all men. So this is why show man carrying a child to school? Or man changing the baby pampers is only, a man tell me the other day, he don't go in pot. I don't know any man here, anybody here, any of the men listening, y'all just go in pot and take out y'all food, or don't go in pot. We didn't know that. So I'm not sure, first of all, who is supposed to show these men how to be good men. And the reason the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence exists with this focus on women is because there is a war against women, a systematic war in legislation. Sexual harassment of women is not illegal. The Domestic Violence Act had to be upgraded, or Sexual Offences Act. In the Bahamas, a man can still rape his wife. Fortunately, in Guyana, we can. So that is why those things exist. So we have to ask, who has to empower the men? And I like, Astel has a company called Be The One, and I like that thing. One of the things I learned about accountability is that I have to be accountable. I will not ask a man to do what I will not do for myself. I stopped drinking when I started doing this work. Because even though many of you might be students in social sciences, they tell you there's no correlation between alcohol and domestic violence, right? The alcohol industry pushes that, but statistically, there's no correlation between alcohol and domestic violence. On the ground, men's violence and alcohol, men are drinking with each other and killing each other, right? So I stopped drinking as a result of that work. I stopped beating children. I used to think beating children was okay. I beat a child in front when a headmistress followed the protocol and asked me to beat the child in front of her. Mr. Granger was in the room when I was beating the child as a teacher that time, right? And then I realized that I can't be talking about domestic violence while thinking it's okay to beat children, no matter the framework or wherever the Ministry of Education talking about. We got to disrupt. There's a word here called disrupt. We have to be disruptive, right? So empowerment is about, first of all, I think for ourselves, doing like what a man had to do, realize, well, I have the power to make that difference in my life. And then, of course, you got to stand up. Because one of the things the guys who stop drinking, and they will tell you, their social they become more isolated. So therefore, we got to create communities of men who are on this journey of transformation and accountability. And that is difficult because there are forces out there which do not want that. The alcohol industry wants men to drink, wants men and women and young people to drink. They want it. They want people to drink, right? Good.
Thank you very much. Okay, I guess no one wants to add to the bit on empowerment, but I want to then go to the third point that I noted again from the first round there, which is the issue of accountability. And I think Vidya just mentioned it again. Accountability, because so I do a bit of work in the environment, and one of the things that we look at is kind of the difference in behaviors across different nation states. And why is it that people often ask, well, how is it that a Guyanese can go to New York and don't throw anything in the street, and they come to Guyana, come back home, and they throw stuff right out the window as soon as they're traveling from the airport? And part of it is that issue of accountability. What role might accountability be playing in our current state of affairs where men tend to show, we see a high degree of violence? And what role in changing the scenario, changing the reality of holding persons accountable within our society? How might that impact on reducing gender violence, violence in general for men? Astel, you look as though you're ready for it.
Again, if we can display violence at the level of parliament. I remember when I used to attend parliament, and it's like you were ashamed to be Guyanese because this is supposed to be the highest decision-making level. And to see how we can be disagreeable and emasculate each other and be disparaging and just downright nasty towards each other. And you don't have a dissenting voice saying, this ought not to be. And I believe that we need to have the authorities or the powers that be to arise and set the standard, be standard bearers. And I think...
If I may interject one sec, because there's an image coming to mind, just permit me a quick. There's an image coming to mind of, I think, of the British Parliament. I think they have less violence and gender-based violence in the society in general. But there's this image that I have of I'm sure it was the British Parliament at some point, where people are jumping over desks and
even in
physically
Africa, even in Africa,
into people's
they throw
face.
chairs.
So just the point I'm trying, I mean, I note what you're saying about what image is portrayed from the top, but I also want to ask if we focus in on sort of, but how can we change in our society in general to affect that issue of accountability such that it directly impacts on
But you see what you did? You have brought a worse situation to diffuse that point. However, when the same British, if they committed an act that they find, they take personal accountability and resign. We don't have that culture. So for us to say that because there's more violence expressed in a different geographic location, that it's somehow okay in Guyana.
No.
I understand.
Let me clarify. Not to say it's okay. I'm saying the correlation between those actions and the violence in the society. That's what we have to kind of look at. But just, yeah.
To save my point, I did say not violence, but what was said. You know, we never throw chairs, we never throw fists and all of that, but the things we spoke of was much more emasculating and catastrophic to me than throwing a punch. You know, they said, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words cannot harm me. I lie. So I believe, you know, they say hurt men hurt people, and we're going back to the empowered people empowered. So whether it comes from somebody who does it or you doing it yourself, I think we all need to take that journey of self-discovery where we understand exactly who we are, individually as well as collectively. And I really believe that the time has to come where we become tired, you know. We will never change what we tolerate. And I think we have tolerated violence for too long. We have tolerated mediocrity for too long.